Hello and welcome to Divine Messy Human. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to ask you a question. If you're a people pleaser, are you happy? And if you are not a people pleaser, have you ever seen a happy people pleaser? I can tell you from my experience, I became resentful and I certainly was not happy when I was deep in people pleasing. I was a people pleaser for probably the first 37 years of my life, making sure that everybody else was taken care of, that everybody else had their nourishing food and that things were looked after for them and that they didn't have to worry about any of the stuff that I was worrying about because I was carrying it on my own. In people pleasing, we create a massive power differential. I put myself as inferior to everybody else who was superior to me. Now, in that, I then needed to chase perfection to prove to myself and others that I was good enough, that I was worthy of their love, that I was worthy, full stop, that I was worth their attention and time. But in doing that, I never had nourishing, nurturing, reciprocal relationships. I was always falling on my sword as a martyr. I would micromanage and over-control things because I thought that if everything were perfect, then I could be loved. Perfectionism itself is out of reach because your idea of what's perfect and my idea of what's perfect are completely different. And whose idea of perfection are we working towards? Perfection also, by its very nature, leaves no room for error. No room for human error, no room for anything other than what is perfect. And yet there is no perfect. So we are striving for something whereby we are pretty much setting ourselves up for failure. We are setting ourselves up for disconnection, for unhappiness. And it's a really interesting dynamic now that I've stepped back from that. And when I say that, I do have to acknowledge, I still have to catch myself when I'm in people-pleasing mode. It is so deeply ingrained in me that I still want to make everybody else around me happy. Now I just am able to catch myself because I realize that that is never going to be in my highest good and my best interest. Now, that's not saying that I am ever going to hurt or harm people deliberately, of course not. But it's not my job to fix them. And it's not my job to do anything other than love them and support them. Now, since I've been quitting perfectionism and people pleasing, I've noticed that my relationships are much more reciprocal. They are much more loving. I feel much more worthy and more like I'm good enough. One of the things that I ask people to do is tell me an age that their children became unlovable. Because often, as people pleasers, we are feeling unlovable or something similar, unworthy, not good enough. And they look at me like, my children have never become unlovable. They are incredible human beings. So when I ask them then, okay, I believe you. When did you become unlovable? There's a longer pause, a bigger catch in the breath, and often tears. They recognize that they never had a day where they woke up and they were unlovable. It wasn't like they hit 3 and all of a sudden, that's it, you're done. It's the stories that they've picked up over time. It is the projections, the conditioning, the programming that they have picked up and made to be true about themselves that drives this behavior. It can also come from a safety perspective. If we feel unsafe emotionally, physically, mentally, psychologically, however it comes, that feeling of not being very safe, we will also work on that people pleasing to keep the tribe that we are in, the community that we are in, happy so that we don't get cast out. And the way that we are physiologically wired is that we want connection. We know that there is safety in numbers. And for that, we need to be accepted by those that we live with and love. And when we go back to our origins, that was our tribe members. Now, if we were cast out into the wilderness, if we were cast out from that tribe, we had a very narrow chance of survival, let alone a chance of thriving, because we needed to survive in numbers. And so when we are being brought up, we are looking for ways that we can be accepted by our tribe, by our family, by our friends, by the school, all of those different aspects of life that we are engaged in. And for those with that people-pleasing tendency, we really have to watch that power differential. What we are looking at is giving people power over us. And when we give people power over us, they use it. There has not been one person who has been grateful for my people-pleasing, for me busting my butt to try and make them happy. Not one. And yet, it didn't fulfill me either. So all of a sudden, I have things that are not working for me looking after others, and also they're not working for me. So what do we do? I think first of all, we recognize that we are all on a level. I can learn things from you. You could learn things from me. We all have areas of expertise. We can learn a lot from children, from adults, from people close to death. We can honestly learn from all ages, from all walks of life, from all societies. And I think it's really, really important that we tap into that wisdom around us. But people pleasing doesn't help us do that because it puts everybody above us. When we can recognize that we are all unique displays and unique expressions of the collective conscience, I think it makes it much easier to step back from that role, to recognize that it's their job to make them happy. You can still be a good person. You can still have your values. You can still do all of the things that you love doing without sacrificing yourself on a sword or on your ideals of making everybody else happy. I think it's really, really important to recognize that behavior within yourself and also to recognize how miserable it can make us at times. I know for me, whenever resentment as an emotion comes in for me, I need to look at my people-pleasing tendencies because often they've crept back in and I'm doing all of the dinners, I'm doing all of the shopping, I'm doing a whole heap of stuff that I actually should be sharing with my partner. And I'm stepping in to do everything for everyone. Now, especially in my case where I have grown-up children, where my partner is very, very capable, I don't need to be doing that anymore. It's almost like a learned stress response. But in those moments when resentment creeps in, I can catch myself. I can recognize that I'm angry, that everybody else is seemingly doing what they want to do while I'm running around trying to make everybody else happy. It's a really big indicator for me that I need to change some of my behaviors without exploding over everybody else. So one of the things that I do is, first of all, I stop and breathe. You will hear me say that so much. The first thing we need to do to understand what's going on in our body is to stop and breathe. Once I've stopped and I've taken a few big deep breaths and I'm grounded and centered, I then ask myself what's been happening in the days leading up to these feelings of resentment. Have I been looking after myself enough? Have I been eating well? Have I been sleeping well? What else is going on for me? And as I answer those questions, I often find it's the fact that I'm putting everybody else above my own needs. And we go back to that very worn out explanation of putting your own oxygen mask on first, which is unfortunately accurate. So we kind of have to keep using it. But I wish there was another analogy to use. I think also in terms of people pleasing, it's recognizing that my mum used to say everybody's shit stinks. And it does. Nobody is perfect. Nobody deserves us to wait on them hand and foot to buy our love. Because effectively that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to purchase love and worthiness through our actions to prove that we are good enough for people who, let's face it, either love and accept us as we are or don't. And who do we want to be with? Do we want relationships with people who take advantage of that? Or do we want healthy, nourishing, reciprocal relationships? I know for a lot of my life, I chose to have the non-equal relationships. I chose to be in a power over dynamic where I was less than, lower than, not good enough for. And again, that is very much story, of course, because I believed I wasn't good enough. But if I go back to that question, what age did I become unlovable? I never did. And neither have you. So think about where you show these people-pleasing behaviors in your life and how could you recognize them sooner and taper them down a little bit? What kind of ways can you start to recognize that you are all equal, that you are part of the collective conscience and so are the people that you're trying to please, and so therefore find a little bit more middle ground? Wanting to help people is beautiful. People-pleasing is really destructive. It creates that needy, codependent relationship often, and that doesn't serve anybody. It certainly doesn't serve your highest good. I am sure I'm going to touch on people-pleasing again in future episodes, but for now, remember that we are all connected to the divine. We are all messy as hell. And all of that, as we love, accept, and honor that within ourselves, the easier our human existence becomes.